program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
All right, it is 5 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you to our fourth work session. We have our three biggest operating budgets to go through with community services, police, and fire. But before we do that, we have two smaller budgets to just cover with the finance department and then a thing called the landfill remediation. But before we jump into all that, thank you to those of you who served on the board of review. We really appreciate it. We did get through all of the work today. The board of review is now closed, so any of you who have signed up for tomorrow, you have just gained a day in your life. So enjoy it well and use the time wisely. And then also at this point, we only have 2 people signed up to come to the water treatment plant lunch on Thursday, not the wastewater plant, but the water plant. So if you'd like to be able to taste some water with your lunch, which is right as fresh as it ever gets. There's one particular drinking fountain at the water plant that has the best, freshest, right out of the plant water. And I can show you where that is, but you'll have to come to the tour in order to see that. So that's Thursday at noon at the water plant on Riverview Drive. So hopefully you can't be there? Okay. Yeah. All right, well, we're trying different things. We thought we'd try a lunch hour thing, see if that works.
I just want to say thank you. I'm serving at the community table.
Okay.
And that's really the only thing that would take precedence over.
Well, you'll still get to drink the good
Now,
water here too.
had it been the, what was the other one, the sewer?
Wastewater.
Then I would have had to go.
Actually, it is a very undervalued, or underappreciated, it's not undervalued, it's an underappreciated facility at wastewater treatment plant. And I do recommend getting out there if you haven't done it at some point. It's, you know, we do strive to be number one in the business for number 2. All right,
Where
with
do we
that,
sign up, Dale?
what's that?
Who do we sign up with?
Just tell Kathy.
Okay.
Yep, and let her know.
I would like to do a ride along the snowplow this winter.
We can do that. Would you like me to drive? I have my CDL.
You might want to rethink
Yeah.
that.
They don't call me that often, but when they do, we know that we're really at the bottom, and so.
Dale's in the truck.
Dale's in the truck.
Get off the
Look out.
sidewalks.
All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and get started, and Jay's gonna take us through the finance department.
Sure. Finance department is made up of a number of different divisions. We've got purchasing, we've got accounting, we've got customer services, we've got finance admin, and we've got the city assessor's office. We process the payroll for all city, library, and health department employees. Issued nearly 20,000 payroll checks in 2017. The city assessor's office establishes and defends assessed values for over 22,000 parcels within the community. Part of that we just finished up with the board of review and the revaluation this year. We process approximately 29,000 utility bills on a quarterly basis, issue nearly 10,000 licenses annually, bartender, alcohol, pet licenses, all sorts of different licenses. We process approximately 18,000 vendor invoices annually and issue payments to those vendors. We account for all revenues and expenditures and annually prepare the CAFR, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. That's the document that you all get and keep on your coffee tables, and so you can sit there and read it and enjoy it every day. We prepare bids and specifications for all major purchases. I think many of you know we share a purchasing manager with the county. We prepare the annual operating budget.
You want to explain how that's cheating?
I will. Okay. Yeah. We prepare the annual operating budget and the capital improvements plan. We manage the finances to maintain the AA1 credit rating from Moody's, and that's when I use the word manage the finances, it was a very intentional word. It's a lot more than, just doing the books, but making sure that that we're following our debt policies, making sure that our fund balance is keeping in line with recommendations from the Government Finance Officers Association as well as council policies. So it's really, and it's doing long-range financial planning to make sure that, again, we're on a trajectory or on a path that's sustainable for the future. Secure bond financing to pay for capital improvements. So every year we go out to the bond market, borrow money to pay for capital improvements, and there's a whole process involved in issuing those bonds and borrowing that money. And then we create new tax incremental districts and annually prepare reports on those districts. We're required to file reports annually with the Department of Revenue on the status of those districts and meet with the Joint Review Board to discuss the status. And then the last several years, we've been creating on average about a TIF district a year. So there's a whole process involved in doing that. Just a couple of graphs indicating some of the changes in our workload. The first graph is looking at our assessing employees and the parcels that we assess. And as you can see, the red line, the number of the parcels we're assessing is going up. And the blue line is the number of employees, and since 1996, that's actually decreased. So again, we're assessing more parcels, but doing so with fewer employees. The second chart, or second graph, is showing the number of utility bills that we process, and that's in thousands, versus the number of customer service employees. So you can see the blue line is flat, representing the number of customer service employees, but the red line is increasing fairly rapidly, which is the number of utility bills that we're processing. So, again, doing more with the same or fewer employees. Some of our service levels, what we're calling deficiencies, or things that have changed in our service levels, things that we're not doing anymore that maybe we were doing at one time. We no longer submit our budget for the annual GFOA, or Government Finance Officers Administration Awards. We still submit our CAFR, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, but we no longer submit budget because there are additional things that we would need to do in the preparation of that budget in order to submit for that, for those awards. Implementation of new online payment options have been delayed. We simply are struggling staff-wise, both within finance as well as in IT, in rolling out new online payment options. It's something that we want to be able to do, but something that we simply haven't had the staff resources to be able to do. Lack of staff resources to focus on process improvement. We've got delays in creating new tax incremental districts. So I've been trying to work on the creation of TID number 13 for several months now, and simply haven't had the time to be able to focus on that with all the other demands on my time. Some of the future service level changes, we may no longer prepare a comprehensive annual financial report. We are required to do an audit. We're required to prepare annual financial statements, but we're not required to do the comprehensive annual financial report. And that's something that we've actually discussed internally, whether or not we want to consider doing the extra level of work that's required to prepare the CAFR. And long-range financial planning, that's one of those things that's very important to do, but when push comes to shove and you're putting out fires on a daily basis, it's one of those things that can often get shoved to the back burner, so to speak. As Dale mentioned, there are just a couple of changes I want to highlight in our budget. One of those is in purchasing. We are, as I said, we've for the last several years, we've shared a purchasing manager position with the county. We're going to continue sharing that position, but in the past, that's been a county employee, and we've reimbursed the county for a portion of that person's salary. And so it's come out of our contractual services line within the purchasing budget. Well, we're reversing those roles starting in 2019. It will start beginning 2019, it will be a city employee, and the county will be covering a portion of those costs, and those will be revenues coming into the general fund. So it's really, in terms of our budget, it's shifting from contractual services into payroll wages. The other change we've got in the budget is in the assessing division. We are eliminating an assessor 2 position, and that individual has already left the organization and was largely responsible for assessing commercial properties. And we are going to be contracting with a local, that will probably end up going out for proposals this year, but a outside assessment firm to do the commercial assessing. Part of the reason for that is commercial assessing is an incredibly difficult and specialized field, and we're having a hard time recruiting, training, and retaining employees in that particular area, and we believe it's more cost effective for us to go with an outside firm to do those. So. Questions concerning the finance department?
Stubble.
Oh, it's November.
Thank you.
Right?
November,
17th?
not quite yet.
Yeah.
He's getting a jump on
You can shoot deer in your backyard.
Yes.
We're having a discussion.
What's your question, Emily?
Stay focused. So, and what we're voting on next, or in 2 weeks, is that part of this?
Yes.
So it's rearranging it, so it's that in the packet.
Right,
So
right, yep.
That's what you just described.
Right, that's
Okay.
exactly, it was, money ended up moving between contractual services and personal services.
For both those groups,
Yeah.
for both the purchasing manager and the commercial assessing.
Okay.
On the same topic, why do we do that? Why do we switch? Was it to help us, help the county, or why do you?
On the purchasing one?
Yeah.
It was a
why do we
request,
flip
it was a request by the county. They're doing a reorganization, and the individual that had been working with us is going to be doing some other roles within the county. So, we're going to go back to a model where it's solely a purchasing. It'll actually be a lower paid position than what the county had. So actually, both organizations are going to save a little bit of money with it. And we've gone back and forth. That's been a shared position for a long, long time. We've shared it with the school district. We've shared it with the, I'm sorry, I think it's something else with the school district. But it's a position that we have had half-time for. I mean, there was a time when they bought half of it from us, and then it went back, and they were doing it, and so we're just going back and forth. But it was a request at the county because of the reorganization that they're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
And as part of working with our partners, so that they don't have changes in the way they want to do things.
You want to do landfill or should we?
Yeah.
Just an additional question, when you're talking about the future service level and the level deficiencies and the implementation of new online payment options, when we talk about IT needs, would their support move this along faster for finance, or is this very separate to your department?
No, it's very interrelated. Yeah, we're dependent upon IT, but IT is also dependent upon us because some of our staff has the expertise in our financial systems to know how to integrate those options together. So it's
So this-
mutually
This is
dependent.
very tied to that piece
Yes,
of money
it is
in the
very
budget.
much so.
Okay.
Finance may want to use a vendor that can work, say, with the website, but then someone's got to figure out how to integrate into the website.
Right, thank you.
So, anything else on finance? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the presentation. This line has been increasing, this red line is increasing for staff that's allocated to processing, let's just say utility bills. When do you foresee this line either flatlining or hopefully decreasing with the increase in utilization of technology to help process automation of
Yeah.
payments?
You know, we're still gonna have to be issuing those bills, but where technology is coming in is really more so on the payment side of those bills. So, you know, we did just this year start, we eliminated the service fee or the convenience fee that we had been charging for payments by credit card. And we did that for utility bills as well. So we're trying to encourage more people to pay their bills online using a credit card. So that isn't, you know, mailing in a check requires additional processing, opening an envelope requires additional processing. If they pay it directly online, it reduces that processing. So that's really where some of that, technology savings starts coming in. But, you know, we're still gonna have to issue those bills. It's just how we process the
And
payments.
people still call with questions.
All right, humans, getting in the way.
They wanna stop their service, they wanna start their service,
Oh, wow.
all those good things.
Yeah, so, if you're not collecting that credit card fee, was that a fee that the city was, incorporating to their budget, or was that a vendor, like a credit card vendor that was collecting it, and now, I guess, how did that work?
So when we were charging the convenience fee, that was a fee that the credit card processing company was collecting. We are now eating those fees.
Right, so then, so are you tracking, or not you, but is the department somehow tracking the cost of those fees versus the cost of automation, where hopefully the fees are, you come out ahead?
I can't, I mean, first of all, are we tracking them? We have an object code set up for convenience fees. So, you know, we should be tracking what we're paying the credit card processor for the convenience fees. But just like, I mean, a lot of other areas, these technology advances just keep allowing us to not have to add staff as we continue going along. So is there going to be an offsetting savings in terms of a dollar amount savings? I don't think so. It's more like, rather than,
Well,
that we'll defer adding a staff position.
What it's done is allowed us to continue to exist with this graph,
Right.
doing what it's doing.
Right.
So, as the service goes up, in many cases, in many departments, and you'll hear some of it from Jeff as well, it's the technology that's allowing us to, you know, be able to keep up with the demand that's there. So, any other questions? Is that?
It didn't really fully answer like when do you project the line to flatline or to decrease, but it did give me some additional information that was helpful.
Well, I think I don't see that line decrease. I mean, we're still processing the bills. The amount of staff time that it takes to process those bills, which isn't really reflected in that line, that was just the number of bills, will, you know, starts decreasing when we receive more payments online, so that there's less manual processing of those bills. But the total number of bills doesn't really
In other words,
continue going up.
if we were to calculate the staff time per bill.
Right.
You know, that would
Yeah.
be a ratio hopefully that's going down with the technology.
Exactly.
But are we calculating that? No.
Along the same lines, what is the percentage of people paying online?
It's historically been pretty low. We have some people set up on ACH, automatic bill pay, which, you know, again, it's a pretty low percentage. And we just eliminated the convenience fee July 1st maybe, so it's only been a few months. So we need to really start, our goal is to start promoting that more, you know, that is an option for people to pay the, in addition to ACH. ACH is free. Credit cards aren't free. But again, we think that, you know, partially it's as Dale said, so we can continue doing what we've been doing, or meeting the increasing demands for service with the existing staff. But the other part is, it's what people expect. People generally expect to be able to pay for things online, and don't expect to be hit with a convenience fee. And we know, I personally received complaints about that.
Plus, it's the state of Wisconsin for your fishing license.
Yes, you know, what.
In your parks pass.
Yeah.
In your park pass, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Nice.
so we made a conscious decision
We did.
that this is, it's an expectation, we believe, of the community that people will be able to transact business online with us 24 hours a day and not get hit with an extra fee.
Okay, oh yes, Jeremy.
I have a question about number of assessing employees. Says it's around 22 or 23 according to the chart.
Ooh, no, I don't know.
But it's, but it's not,
No.
that's not the case.
No,
as far as I
no,
can tell.
not at all, not at all.
Because I'm looking at the budget and it's more like, you know, around 5.
Yeah.
I was gonna say 4 or 5, yeah.
So maybe that, yeah, I was like, I had to double check.
No. Which has been a very, very, very busy staff this year because of the reassessment. It's been a small group of people that have worked an awful lot of hours to.
So everybody's going on vacation now, huh?
Yeah, I did just get a vacation request from Heidi, actually.
So-
Yeah.
Are you gonna make her go before the board of review to grant it, or?
Yeah.
You do that on your own?
All right. Then, we had one other just administrative thing that's relatively quickly. We have a landfill remediation account. We have a landfill, it's a Superfund nominated landfill out west of town. In the early 90s, we formed what was known as a PRP group, a potentially responsible party group. And they pay half of all of our expenses to maintain and work with that landfill to do what needs to be done to it. And so there's a budget, I don't remember what it is offhand, but it's $130,000 or something, and half of that's funded by the tour.
Where is that located?
It's west of town, if you go west out on Highway C, past where Painting Hill used to be. You'd never know it by looking at it, it's a beautiful forested area, but it's actually an old landfill from the early 60s through the 1980s, and all of the, it was the community landfill before 7 Mile, so.
And that's in the city of Eau Claire.
No, it's
We,
county
no, it's
union.
not in the city of Eau Claire, it's in the town of Union, but it's city of Eau Claire property, so.
Oh.
Yeah, so the city owns land that's
Okay.
not in the.
Same place as a shooting range.
What's that?
Shooting range?
It is where the police have their shooting range as well.
Oh.
Yep, so. All right, Jeff, unless there's any questions on that, let's turn it over, and we're gonna talk a little bit about community services. This is our largest department, with a incredibly broad reach and impact to the community, and we'll give Jeff some time to talk a little bit about what you do and how you do it, and challenges you're having with it.
Yes, so I'm not gonna say everything that's on these sheets, but I'm gonna try to highlight the parts, and it's all important, but, community services, as Dale said, is the largest department in the city. We consist of 5 divisions. We've got the parks, forestry, cemetery, buildings and grounds, street and fleet, recreation, utilities, and transit divisions. I'll go through these one at a time. If you want to ask questions at the very end, once I get through it all, it's going to be quite a lengthy discussion, so if you want to do it after each one, that'd be fine, but if you want me to just trudge through all of it, and at the end ask questions. So, looking at our parks, forestry, cemeteries, and buildings and maintenance division, the activities that we do, you see our folks out there all the time. They're mowing our parks and athletic fields, cleaning our facilities at our pavilions and restrooms, tree pruning and planting, and stump grinding are full of our trees, prepping our athletic fields for clearing snow from the trails in the wintertime, and then also our cemetery maintenance and building upgrades for our custodians. On the activities, I did this a little bit differently. I put the increases so you can see how drastically things have increased in the city of Eau Claire in the last 21 years. In 1996, the number of parks we had 21 parks. In 2017, we have 36 parks. Coming online very shortly, we got the Northwest Community Park, we got the Cannery District, and then also the Haymarket Plaza are coming online. So again, these are added parks for our employees to have to take care of. Wow. In regards to acres of parks, in 1996, we had 645 acres. Today, we have over 1,000 acres of parkland. The National Recreation and Parking Association sets a guideline that a community such as ours with a population of 70,000 people should have about 840 acres of parks. So we're beyond that, which is good, but it also takes people to make sure we maintain those. And our customers, we have a level of standard that we keep our parks at, and it's a high level of standard, and our customers are accustomed to that. But that is something that, as I get down to the current service level of deficiencies, that we may have to look at decreasing that. Miles of trails in 1996, we had 4.3 miles. Today, we have over 31 miles of trails in the city. It's a beautiful trail system. I mean, one thing that when you talk to people that come to Eau Claire, they really are impressed by our trail system, and they should be, because it's beautiful.
Madison's the only city that has more miles of trail than we do.
It's like a 50K. It's a 50K.
Oh, good. You can run them all. Special events, in 1996, we had 41 special events. Last year, we had 108, and we're actually gonna surpass that this year with our special events. Again, that not only affects community services, but it affects our police department, our fire department, and really behind the scenes with a lot of finance, because we end up having to invoice groups for the services that we provide. But it really touches almost every department in the city when we have these special events, and they're great. You go downtown on any night or on the weekends, and it's amazing how much activity is going there. And just 15 years ago, we thought downtown was dead, and it's vibrant now. Looking at the number of employees we had, in 96, we had 28.5 parks and forestry employees. Today, we have 26. We have less employees today than what we did. And that's a common theme that you've heard from all the other departments, is that we have less people doing more. Custodians in 96, we had 13 employees. Today, we have 7. And they are maintaining over 250,000 square feet of building space with City Hall, Central Maintenance Facility, and the library. And we're doing that with 7 employees. And again, I don't want to go through all this, but I'm going to try to highlight. But if you look at the graphs, it shows you basically how that is diverging. The acres of parks are going up, our number of employees are going down. The same thing if you look at miles of trails. That's kind of an unusual graph, but you look at the employees, but that mile of trails is just going up in space. It's just flying high there. And we have plans to add more trails to our system. Some of the current service level deficiencies that we have right now in our parks and forestry and cemeteries and building grounds is that we don't always get out there to sweep and maintain our trails. We do it on a complaint basis. Someone complains while we get out there. That's the one thing that we know we should be doing, and we want to be doing it, but we just don't have the employees to do it. So typically, just like a street, although it doesn't get beaten down like a street does with cars and truck traffic, but the longevity of those trails could be greater if we're out there doing some type of seal coating, doing some type of crack sealing that we do on our streets. The snow and ice control on the trails, we don't get at those like we do the streets. We actually, when we go into a plow operation, we're out there doing the streets first, because that's our #1 priority, to keep safety. We do have a priority one loop that's down in the downtown area for the trail system. We get out there rather quickly. But the other parts of the trails we get once we have the streets all cleaned up. And that's a priority we've set because it's important that we have that safety on the streets that we have those put on. Tree pruning in our parks and on our boulevard trees. That's another deficiency that we're not getting at in a timely manner like we would like to. One thing that we have been doing in community services is that we've been cross-training our employees, something that is it's becoming more and more common with municipalities, especially with not being able to hire employees to get to the level that you would need to have them. So we're using the employees that we have that might be working in other areas. It could be in the streets, in street maintenance, it could be in utilities. We're actually training them to do some of the other jobs. One example of that is we just sent 30 of our employees to chainsaw safety training. We've got the Emerald Ash Borer that is now been detected in the city of Eau Claire, and we expect to see a rise in the amount of ash trees that start dying off. And the issue with ash trees, when they die off, they go quickly, and they become brittle, and they become very dangerous, especially ones that are on the boulevard. Some of the things that we've had to do is reduce some of our garbage collection throughout the park system. We have less timely preventive maintenance to some of our public buildings. Again, we got HVAC systems that we have to make sure we maintain, so this time of year that we turn on the heat, comes on, and then summertime we turn on the air, if that works properly too. We've had to reduce some of our cleaning standards to our facilities. We have 7 of our custodians that are maintaining 250,000 square feet. That's a lot of area that we have to maintain. And then the other thing we're not doing right now, and we have to find a way of getting at this, is that we're not doing any real preventive maintenance on our parking lots and our parks. Again, those are areas too that would benefit from crack sealing, doing some type of slurry seal and that. So again, with our street division, they're stretched in. You're going to hear that next with that division. But those are things that we're trying to work in to get done. Future service level changes without additional resources for the parks and forestry would be a reduction in the standard of upkeep to our park amenities. Again, when we have the reservations in our pavilions in areas of parks, we're always out there touching them to make sure that everything is ready for our customers. So that might be something we cut back on. Further reduction in access to shelters and restrooms, and ability to provide services for special events is one that, we've already had a situation during this last summer where we had our vast amount of our resources, not only community services, but PD and fire, that during 4th of July, we had one event that came up to the special events committee that we had to deny because we just didn't have the resources for it. And we didn't want to put ourselves in a situation that, the officers that we have patrolling the rest of the city are at a special event and they're not actually watching over the rest of the city. So that's kind of it. I'm not going to go through everything else. You can read that, but any questions, any of the parks, forestry stuff?
If I could start, a few things. Do you think that our special events policy, is it working how we want? And is there a chance that maybe we're asking too many things to be special events that maybe don't need to be, and that's taking up more staff time?
Well, again, we determine a special event based upon the criteria that we set.
And I'm wondering if we maybe, is that criteria creating more special events that don't otherwise necessarily need to be under that category?
I'm trying to, because I think the council approved the special events
Yeah.
ordinance, so, there are, I guess what I would say is that certainly the number, you know, to become a special event, it's gotta hit a threshold of over 100.
Right, it has to be publicly noticed, but these used to be higher criteria, and we lowered the criteria.
Well, we didn't really lower the criteria as much as we lowered some of the administrative bars to make them happen. So we still said, when your event is gonna have to close a street, or have alcohol, or have more than, a certain number of people, that became special enough that we wanted to coordinate it with all the departments, which means, we have a special events committee. We wanna make sure that police and fire, everybody knows, what's gonna happen with it. And so, we're pretty comfortable with that line that says, anything above this is special enough that it needs some special attention in order to properly manage it, to make sure the alcohol is taken care of, that the security is there, and those kinds of things. What we did, that maybe addresses your question, is we changed those levels as to, in terms of when it has to go to council. I think a lot more of them now can be done administratively. And so that has saved us time, and, in order to be able to process them. But that idea that, hey, this is big enough, and that we want to make sure that, the left hand and the right hand knows what they're doing, and that we've, covered our bases to make sure it's properly handled. I think we feel pretty strongly about that.
With what qualifies and what
Yeah.
doesn't.
And the other thing is, what we wanna know is that if they're in a park, we wanna know because someone may have reserved that park space, and if we don't know of an event coming in, there could be a conflict between two groups. So, as Dale said, we do administratively approve several of these that the council doesn't actually see, because it's below that, it hits a threshold, it's a special event, but it isn't something that the council has.
What we will see, though, is more times when we have to tell a special event that, because we take the time to look at it, we say, we just don't have the resources to do that, we can't close down the street, we can't. And we'll encourage them to find other alternatives that don't require a special event. So many times we can have that conversation with them, and if they restructure their event, then it's not gonna be as much work for them, and it doesn't have to, require going through the process.
A few other things that I wanted to just bring.
Excuse me,
Yes.
before you move on, so hang on a bit. So when you talk about services that are not provided for special events, what kinds of things are you seeing that would be visible to the public? Like, my special event used to have this, and now I don't get that anymore. Is it
I'm not sure what.
well, inability to provide services for special events?
So that would be if
Well, to say
our
no.
department, or the police department, or fire department can't physically do it because we don't have enough people to
Right.
do it. That's
So-
where that becomes.
Okay, so then here's where I want you to bring me along. So I know there's these big ones, like when they closed the street downtown.
Races
and
and things, yeah.
that was a huge, thousands of people. And then when I was working over here at the church, we closed the street, and all you did was dropped off the barriers. Are we talking both of those are ones that would fall through the crack, or are we talking just the big ones? Like,
I think it falls on when we have several special events going on the same time. July 4th was one of those. If it's the ones that you're talking about, typically that isn't something that's going to create an issue for us, because we do that.
But that competition for time, that helps me figure out what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Just on the special event thing again, you generate revenue from special events, right?
We cover our
There's a
costs.
fees. Okay, I was gonna ask about that, if it's covering your costs or not covering your costs, is it a sufficient fee for that? Is it something that should be looked at there to help administer these things? I mean, is that something that you should look at?
So we have and finance has a lot to do with that. We have a fee structure, so that, when people come in, and we say you're gonna need this many barricades, you're gonna have 2 police officers, you're gonna have that, they have a sense of what that cost is gonna be. Our rate structure is to recover our costs, though, not to make money.
We're not making a
And I'm not sure, and I know Steve is not here, but we might have some challenges with actually charging more than our costs, but I'd have to look at that. But we're pretty diligent in trying to cover all of our costs, which is different. That, you know, you talk about changing. There was a period of time where everybody got, I think it was 200 hours. So, you know, our policy was every special event got 200 hours of free city services towards their event. And probably 15 or 20 years ago, we changed that and said, no, you get charged at zero, or, you know, for the first hour that we provide service to the event.
And it's not, I don't know that it's as much a cost or a cost recovery issue as it is just a resource issue. I mean, because especially for those larger events like 4th of July, all of a sudden, we don't have enough, you know, we have multiple events, also we don't have enough police officers to cover them.
Yeah,
We don't have enough fire personnel to cover them, even bringing people in on overtime, we don't have enough to cover. enough
So
to cover.
real, like 4th of July, Jerry, how many people did you call in last 4th of July?
We had everybody, we canceled vacation for
Yeah,
everybody.
so nobody was allowed to take vacation for the 4th of July because of the special events. And Chris, you had how many?
Grievances?
No.
I think your grievances.
Yeah, but how many people on special?
26.
26 got in? And how much did you have?
We had all of our park staff.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not a matter of recovering the money, because we got paid for all that extra overtime, but we just don't have the people.
And the same holds true for the marathon, we had the air show. All those, when they come in, they really tax our staff.
So, I'll just finish up with that, is I'm still in favor of us looking at how we might wanna recover more cost to make it more, so that we're able to do what we need to do. So that's just, I'm putting that out there, so you look open to hearing more about that in the future. On taking care of the parks, two things. I know from the forestry garden that, for example, when we needed a porta potty down there, we ended up paying for half of it, an EDA one, and that's just the policy now. Probably wasn't the policy 15 years ago, but that's a park, it's in a public park, it's being used by the public, both people that go to the garden and others, and it's being split cost between the Parks Division and the garden. And so there's those kind of savings that are being realized alongside everything that you're seeing. There's all these places where different user groups are being asked to contribute to be able to have, or to be able to participate in the park. So something to keep in mind on top of all this. The last thing is I wonder sometimes, for example, we do a lot of mowing in our parks, and it takes a lot of time to do mowing. And I think about 4th Street, again, as an example, it's 15 acres of green space and probably 10 acres of it gets mowed. And part of me wonders whether we might want to look at other options for less intensive work that needs to be done. Like maybe we decide to do pollinators, or maybe we decide to let it go in more prairie grass or something like that. But just where could we find some operational savings where we don't have to put as much maintenance time into it, but we still have something that's beautiful and people appreciate. So I'll just leave that for my comment.
And even, as you mentioned, we've done that over in 4th Street too, is that part on the north end, we don't mow, we keep that up.
And Excel's not mowing
Neighbor.
A few years ago, we did a process improvement actually on mowing, because we had
To make it more common.
to make it more cost effective, because we would have a boulevard crew that would go to a boulevard, you'd have another crew that might did the retention pond, another one might do the park, and you say, well, why don't we just have one person go mow all the grass in that area? So, that was maybe 10 years ago or so that we did that, so. Catherine, did you have something you wanted to add?
Jill, did you have something else before I go? Oh, okay, that was one, okay, thank you. Mine goes back to the special event, so I had shared with our city manager and our finance director and 3 other directors here tonight that I'm really curious about asking, in addition to the cost recovery, you know, if we're maxed out at cost recovery, if your department was able to have additional funds specifically tied to special events, what type of difference would that make to you if we were able to move some money around?
I think, as James said before, is that it's not so much the financial part, it's the personnel part of it, because we've
Come down to adding bodies.
We'd have to add bodies, because what we've had to do is, I mean, as Jerry said, we we canceled vacations. We don't allow vacations on certain days with employees, and they just know that because we have to have everybody there to work an event. So the having more in resource money, I don't think that is the answer for us.
It comes down to, you know, in all the areas that are servicing the special events, if you had more people, not only would they be able to help with the special events, but they'd help with all these other graphs as well.
So I understand, that's a big picture that we have to look at, is adding more people to our budget because of the year-round
Right.
obligations that the city has.
It's engagement, I mean, people are engaged.
Which gives us more
Absolutely.
capacity for the peaks.
Absolutely.
Right.
That being said, this idea about, I think there's a real opportunity cost that we're losing when we're saying no to events. So it's not just that we're saying no because we don't have the bodies, it's that we are also potentially losing hundreds of thousands of dollars over a weekend because they're not coming to our hotels.
That's true.
So I'm.
This was the first year we said no to a big event.
And what we tried to do is, we do work with these groups, say, is there another weekend perhaps that would work better for you, rather than, it came up on the same day as July 4th, and it was just impossible for us to.
So I guess what I'm looking at is maybe a possibility of how do we, aside from adding, right now we have some real fiscal constraints that perhaps a referendum would help us to address permanently. While we have our fiscal restraints, are there other options that we can look at, such as could we bring in temporary workers to help with a special event? If the special event folks were to pay for that. If we're gonna say no because of lack of law enforcement, can we give the applicant an option to say, well, you can't have City of Eau Claire officers because they are already committed. If you could find a way to hire off-duty officers from a neighboring county, a neighboring municipality, here's the criteria in which we could say yes to your special event. And so not only do we have that cost recovery, because they would still, well, they would have to pay for theirs, we would not be losing that room tax revenue to help our overall.
So the answer to that is
expenses.
yes, and those are conversations that we're having. Like I said, this is the first year we really ran into having to, you know, say no to something. But those are internal conversations we have to say, are there alternative ways of getting where we need to in terms of, you know, safety, protection, cleanliness, and those kinds of things. So, yeah, we're having those conversations and we'll see what we can do with them.
That was my thought as well, because I know we lent firefighters to Altoona one time, and maybe they could lend us some.
Lend us some back.
That's right.
So, yes.
I just want to say, I would hope that you wouldn't take that as criticism for the over and above work that you're doing, but I think that identifies
It's not criticism
a
at all.
rationale for.
None taken.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we understand the value of the special events, we encourage them, we love to see them, and it's a conversation that we needed to have, and that, you know, we're struggling to meet the demands of the special events, put on our staff resources.
I think it's an instructive moment, because there's gonna be more moments like that, and so we have to use that as a moment that helps transform the way that we respond. We're working, everybody in this room is working so hard to make our community what it is, and we can't be the victims of our own success by starting to say no.
Yep.
I just wanted to correct one statement.
Yeah.
It was 26 for the air show and a music festival, not 4th of July.
Okay.
That was the bigger show.
So Jeff, that was one of your 5 divisions, and you've used up with the half an hour we were thinking you were going to have, so. To your peers who are waiting behind you, police and fire.
I will try to move this along.
All right.
So,
Very
street,
important conversations.
our street and fleet division, you know, you see our street maintenance personnel out there filling potholes, crack sealing, spray patching, chip sealing, and now, if you haven't heard them, the street sweepers are coming along to get the leaves up. Soon to come are snow and ice control. And also clearing our sidewalks when it snows, we got that 24-hour limit that we have to make sure we abide by, just like we expect our citizens to do. Storm inlet repairs and detention pond maintenance. Looking at the number of miles of streets, in '96 we had 300 miles of street. Today we have almost 350 miles of streets. So again, the number of miles of ice control routes that we maintain, in '96 we did 40 miles, today we do about 87 miles. And now, looking at the number of employees, in '96 we had 39.5 street employees, and today we have 33 street employees that are maintaining 50 more miles of streets. In regards to our fleet division, this is one of the divisions that we actually saw, or a section of a division that we saw an increase. We had 13 3/4 of a position in '96, and today we have over 15 1/4 positions in our fleet. And part of that is that, we had 354 pieces of equipment in '96, and today we have 416 pieces of equipment. Over 90% of the equipment that we're getting today has significantly more technology, computers that we never had back in '96. So it's our mechanics are well trained. They're all trained in at different levels, but at a highest level to be able to maintain our equipment. You can see on the graphs, the miles of streets and the miles of ice control, they're going up, and our employee level, it's kind of that common theme, has gone down since '96.
One of the ways that we're addressing that is, if you recall, 3 years ago, we did a consolidation between the streets and the parks employees, and so there's a bigger pool of people that can backfill from the street employees. And then we also maintain, we joked earlier about, me driving a snowplow, but there is also a group of labor employees, they're more administrative employees that volunteer to plow snow, and they get trained on plowing the snow. And so when we reach our capacity with first the street crew and then the parks crews, we have this other pool of people that we can tap into to help out, so.
We have the funds to do that?
Well, we have 46 pieces of equipment. When we go into a full plow operation, we put 46 pieces of equipment out there. You can see we only have 33 street employees. That's embedded in that 48 1/4 positions. Out of those are 33 street employees. Typically, when we get to the point of a full plow operation, 13 of those employees have already been in somewhere between 8 and 16 hours, depends upon when it starts snowing to the point that we're gonna do a full plow operation. So they're not able to be in the full plow operation, as Dale's saying, that we take people from other divisions, and that's where they come from, typically through community service. Now, we do still have a few people that are on the list that are willing to come in and give it their all when it's ready to plow. And that's very much appreciated, because Dale and I have been in that plow trucks before. And so that cross-training that I've talked about before is how we're able to bridge that gap that we have within especially the street division. Some of the current service level deficiencies, I'm gonna just hit a few of these, but there's bridge and joint sealing that we do, same thing as crack sealing, but we get along those joints to prevent the water from getting into those joints during the spring of the year or late winter, where it gets in there and then it freezes again at night, and you get that expansion and creates that potholes. And if we're out there doing those sealings of those joints, we prevent that from happening. And again, we get more longevity on our street surfaces. Tunnel maintenance, sign straightening and vision obstruction. I know I've gotten a few emails from people saying, hey, I can't see my stop sign. Those are the things that, we want to be out there doing, but sometimes we don't have the staffing to get out there and make sure that's all done. Some of the future service level changes, you know, right now, I'm proud to say that we've developed a lot of efficiencies in our plowing. And when we get out there and do a full plow operation, our average time from the beginning of starting the full plow, now this is the residential part of it, was a little bit over 6 hours. The reason for that is the equipment that council has afforded us to get to be more efficient in our plowing. We don't just have a main plow, but we have a lane on those trucks. So it's less driving for us to clear a street of snow. That has had a huge impact, plus changing some of our routes. We have 26 full plow operation routes. We've been able to look at areas that have taken a little bit longer. We know when we need to put more resources in an area to get it done in a timely manner. Wasn't that many years ago, 20 years ago, it would take us, up to 16 to 20 hours to full plow the city. But that's changes that we've made as a division, and we've become more efficient. So that's something that, if we don't get additional resources at some point, that the city's not going to stop growing. So we're going to see that miles of street increase. We could look at further reduction in storm and detention pond maintenance. Again, what that does, those detention ponds are very important for us because, again, I go back 20 years ago, just things were, we had significant flooding in areas of the city, and the city council has purchased some homes in areas that were prone to flooding, and we built detention ponds. And we have seen, knock on wood, but we don't see the problems that we saw 20 years ago. And it's a lot of that's because of our partners in engineering have made sure that with new developments, we've got detention ponds. The maintenance of these are very important because if we don't get that silt out of there and everything, we start losing capacity of that detention pond.
Any questions on streets? Yes, Jeremy.
A question that overlaps into parks pretty well, so I thought I would bring it up. And it kind of comes down to, one of the deficiencies that we're starting to see is not being able to, like clear our trails or maybe, find different, actually search out obstruction of signage or things like that and focus on, having to do a complaint basis for that for the most part. And
Right.
I guess I'm kind of wondering where you see, and also I guess the litter pickup falls under this, but where do you see like volunteer opportunities fitting in to finding, like say we had a crew that went out every month to our to all miles of our trails, that was like a volunteer group. What kind of like restrictions would they have to what they could do versus, what would they be
Seem like
empowered
adopt
to
a
do?
trail.
Yeah.
For Friends of the Trail.
Friends of the Trail, right.
So like, I guess I'm trying to figure out where the boundaries may be and.
The boundaries are
in terms of that.
primarily gonna be related to liabilities. First
Yeah.
and foremost, liabilities or injury to the volunteers themselves, so we don't wanna do work there. And the other is that there's certain work that has to be done at certain levels and certain standards, or it creates liability for us. So for example, when you talk about obstructions, if that obstruction's not properly, cleared, or, we're putting a stop sign back up, but it's not put up, the right way, then that can create other liabilities for us. So those are really the limitations, and the other limitation is, coordinating those types of activities with volunteers takes time in itself. So, creating that pool of volunteers, creating the pool of resources, takes resources in and of itself. In terms of the, shift from being able to actively, monitor or inventory the city, whether that's, being able to walk every sidewalk every year, having someone that can do an inventory of all the sidewalks. We stopped doing that many years ago, and is more on a complaint basis, or whether it's the obstructions. we do rely a lot more on complaints for more reporting to us. There, I think social media and technology can help us, and I see that, we will continue to make more advances on how we can reach out and engage the community to tell us about those things, and be able to, send us a picture or do things, and then we would be able to. So that's a relatively easy way of engaging the community, and getting the information we need so that we can respond. And I definitely see we'll be doing, more of that, or as the technology and the tools and the community engagement, improves and gets better for us.
I had the same thought, well, which is what you said, I thought there might be a more efficient way, like everything is so complaint centered, which is just how it is, rather than, people email me and then I get hold of Jeff or I get hold of Dave, or it feels just really kind of clunky, if they could just go to Google form and be like, oh, or whatever you come up with,
So there's opportunities for apps that go there, there's other software that's available for that, and then, we get, some of that comes just through our Facebook page, people will put something out there on the Facebook page, and we're able to grab it and refer it out.
So that's like a legit way of, that's I don't know, but, like, what's your preferred, seems like that'd be hard for me if things that requests are coming at me in all these different ways.
Yeah, which is what happens now. I mean, we do not have a systematic or coordinated complaint response system, maybe someday, but, at this point, we don't have everything going into one system. It's logged, we track who does it, how much time is on it, who did it, it got done. That would be an ideal world, but we don't have that right now.
My daughter was in Baltimore, they had, you could text to this number, any complaints to the city, so you take pictures of the full garbage cans in the park and text them to the city, and whether they acted on them or not, I don't know, but that's what they encourage the citizens. I mean, because everybody's got a cell phone, so take a picture, text it, and it went to a central place, and then it was disseminated to who needed to handle it.
Well, and a friend of mine, Drew Neese, who does software development, he's actually developed a sort of rough app, but he got a response that they didn't, I think IT decided it wasn't really in keeping with what they wanted, or maybe they just didn't have the capacity to look at it. But he's actually developing something right now.
So part of that was the capacity issue, in being able, and then, is that, because then, do you want everybody to have to download an app, or do you try and find something that's even simpler, like, here's the number you can text it to, and you don't have to do anything further.
Then I can imagine the problem would be, okay, how do you keep up with all the people texting you?
Someone's gotta manage
And
it.
then, I mean, there's your catch-22,
But they figured it out, and I wonder, Baltimore, you said, does it? Yeah, so I wonder.
So I'm not sure they always acted on it, but.
What are the revenue limits?
So that is, I brought that up because that's an avenue that we feel we can improve on and explore, in order to help, that became became very real to us when we had the storm in 2012, was it? And we put out a call on Facebook to say, send us pictures of the storm damage. And we learned more about the condition of the city in about 2 hours on Facebook than we did from all the 911 calls that came in. So it was very, very powerful, and it allowed us to immediately identify the area of the city that had gotten hit harder than, because in the middle of the night, and deploy the resources. So the power of being able to collect that information is pretty impressive, and we hope to be able to expand more of that with time.
What about his question about around volunteer capacity and what we're trying to do to build that, though, as a larger idea?
That's, we do some of
We
that
have
already with the Amazing Eau Claire cleanup.
Beautification.
Yeah, right, we do organize some of that.
Yeah.
As Dale said, I think we get into a situation we have to look at as far as the liability on groups. But I know they've done it.
Yeah, and we work with, we have Boy Scout troops, we have other people who call in, and so we have a volunteer coordinator, and that person's job is to try to link opportunities with the people who want to volunteer. So.
I think neighborhood associations would be.
Yep. Anything else? All right, that's 2 out of 5.
Okay, recreation. Looking at Hobbs, Pardon me? Hobbs Fairfax Rec programming, the big activities there that we've seen, big increases are concession revenue in '96. We had about $36,000 that we brought in 2017, almost over $290,000. That was a big change in 2011 where the recreation division started doing the concessions at Hobbs and then Carson football. And so that's where that big change took part. Again, the recreation is a very small division. We have 6 full-time employees, but we have hundreds of seasonal employees that work for us, whether it's at Hobbs, at Fairfax Pool, or any of the other venues that we have. I guess I look at the big impacts that we've seen in the last 20 years. In '96, programs offered, we had 479 programs that were offered. Today, it's over 750 programs. And the issue there is that we have more programs, but we have less people in those programs. It's taking us to become very inventive to try to get people out to do more things. It's a challenge, certainly. We do have some programs that people would like to see us have, but we just don't have the personnel to do that. Some of the big impacts, athletic facility reservations in '96 went from 680 reservations in 2017. We're up to over 2,500 reservations. So again, that we're seeing a lot of reservations increases, but we still have that lack of full-time employees, but a lot of seasonals. Hobbs ice rental, we saw a big increase in that. Again, that primarily is due to a lot of the youth hockey programs and a lot of the traveling programs that have increased that. And hockey has become a very popular sport in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and have had a lot of success. Looking at the graphs, you can see our number of programs being offered have increased significantly, and our full-time employees have stayed, actually decreased. Some of the current service level deficiencies, if we see, well, right now we don't have a dedicated staff for our custodial work, so we actually have seasonals that do that work. With the combining of community services and Parks Recreation with the rest of the divisions, we actually are using some of our custodians now to help with the preventive maintenance, because those are very important to stay on top of, especially the HVAC systems. If we don't stay on top of those are very costly challenges that you may not plan for, but then when they go down in the worst possible time. Some of the future service level changes, we could look at discontinuation of some of the programs, eliminate an indoor ice sheet at Hobbs during the off-season. Right now, we take one down. We typically try to have 2 that are available year-round for the summer programs, and also for lunch skating. We could look at Fairfax pool hours operations reduced.
Any questions on recreation?
Kids do a great job. My kids use them.
Did they do a sailing class?
The sailing, no, I don't.
Okay.
I think they do, no, they do the River City event.
That has volunteer instructors, by the way.
When you have people backfill or take on different positions, just to help out, is there a discrepancy in pay for what somebody was hired on to do and then the scope of their responsibilities if they're helping out in a project that maybe they weren't necessarily hired for?
Yeah.
Is there,
At
how do you
times,
reconcile that?
there are. We typically give employees an upgrade in that level, so if they're working up, they'll get an upgrade. If someone works down, we don't decrease their.
Okay.
Any other questions in recreation? Okay, Then,
Utilities.
Hopefully the
Oh.
exciting parts.
The utilities are coming up, yeah.
I know Miss Police and Fire to run bump like that. Obviously.
So, looking, overall with utilities, the city of Eau Claire operates a 24 million gallon water drinking plant. We have a water distribution system with 377 miles of water main ranging in size from 6-inch to 30-inch, 337 miles of wastewater collection system, and a 11.5 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant that we just recently completed a $40 million improvement in. And then also, we have a lab section that our lab actually, they test over 30,000 samples of water and wastewater samples, and these are regulatory tests that we do on an annual basis. I think, we talked about our meter program back in 2010. We started a program where we started putting automatic meter reading systems. It's a system that gives us the ability to remotely access the meters and read them. Jay was talking about one of the impacts we'll have on his department is, our goal with changing out all of our meters to an AMR system is to be able to read our system and go to monthly billing. Currently, we have 2 employees that it takes them a month to read a third of the city. Once our system is up and running, we'll be able to have 1 employee who'll be able to read the entire city in a day, which that creates such an efficiency, it gives us the ability to do a monthly billing cycle. Of course, that has an impact on Jay's world, because now they have to process 29,000 utility bills.
Every month.
Every month, rather than.
Every quarter.
Every quarter.
So really, it's a 4-fold increase in the number of bills that
Yeah.
we're processing.
Yeah.
Does it help though financially to have money sooner than waiting to collect it?
Does it help financially? Absolutely, because the time value of money, invest that money.
Some of the other things that we've added on to our utility division, a few years ago, we started a cross-connection control program. It's a requirement by the DNR, so we don't have someone connecting improperly to our water system. You've all heard about the lead service line program, which is going great right now with the rolling replacements of lead service lines out there. Some of the current service level deficiencies is we're not getting at our leak detection program as much as we would like to, but part of the year we're dependent upon good weather. And then stormwater maintenance, that's another part of the program we'd like to see a little bit more going forward with that. And then future service levels, and I put it down there twice because this is important, it's just keeping up with regulatory requirements, because we continue to get more and more.
They aren't going down?
What's that?
They aren't going down?
They're not
Going
going
under recording those? Any
So
questions
any
on
questions?
utilities? Big division, a lot of, it's one of those services that we just take for granted. You turn on your faucet and flush the toilet, but a lot of hard work goes into, keeping that water flowing in and out of all the properties. All right then, bring it home with the last
And
one.
lastly, and certainly not the least, but transit division. We have 15 fixed routes, 2 university routes, and 3 express routes that we run. In '96, we had 492,000 miles of total route miles that we traveled. In 2017, we had over 700,000 route miles. In passengers, in '96, we had 562,000 passengers. Last year, we had 865,000. A big change on that is when we took the university and have them as a customer. had increased that significantly. This is another division that we did see an increase in the number of employees, and that was primarily because of the contract with the university to provide service to them. You can see the route miles have increased, and all the number of passengers from 96 have increased. Some of the current service level deficiencies, we have difficulties in expanding service to different areas of the city. Fare revenues are not keeping up with operating costs. We are seeing a decline in ridership, but that isn't anything that's directly related just to the city of Eau Claire. It's something that we're seeing nationally, and part of that can be attributed to Uber, Lyft, and then also the economy. When the economy is going good, we typically see a decline in ridership. And certainly, you know that we've got the grant funding from the Tiger Grant to build a new transfer center, so we're working eagerly with the FTA on that right now, and our hopes is that we're gonna move that forward. And it's a challenge, certainly, working with another agency like that, but we'll be happy to see this when we get an opportunity to break ground on a new transit.
One of the bullet points on here that's really worth noting is, of our 22 buses, 14 of them are due to be replaced. And there's a significant structural liability in our operating system there with transit revenue.
Does that include what we just did in the capital?
Yes, those are the 14 that are due, but we do have in place with we put in for the grant through the
Volkswagen grant,
VW
yeah,
grant.
which is not including.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
It doesn't
If we
include-
get them,
it would
they
be
will,
14 minus 5 or something.
they will drop that number down
Yeah,
if we
they
get the
would
grant.
drop if we get that. And I think we have 3 on order right now.
Any questions on transit?
Just
Yes.
a quick one about these charts. I just, in some cases, like this one, it would be interesting to allow them to have a little bit more nuance in terms of the years, because we're often just comparing 1996 to 2017, and obviously there's things that happen along the way that may increase or decrease ridership, or the number, and obviously we mentioned the university contract, and the timing of some of this stuff can give us some perspective on what difference we make by making different choices or creating new partnerships. So sometimes, having multiple years of reference would be helpful, just for.
It's good feedback. I mean, this is our first year
Yeah,
with
and I
this
like.
format.
Yeah, I think it's
so,
great. I just want.
We'll certainly be able to build on that.
Awesome, thanks.
Anything else in transit? Yes.
So I don't know if it was this graph or the other graph, where it just said in thousands, and I looked at the employees, and I'm like, wow, we have a lot of transit employees. And I realized there were two different measures.
Two different measures. You're trying to graph thousands with 20.
Very creative.
We do that, yes, so.
No, no comments.
Okay, well, then if there's no other questions there, Jeff, thank you very much for what you do and sharing that information tonight. So, any other questions for Jeff? Okay,
Yeah, thank you,
then let's turn it over to Jerry and let's talk about the police department for a
Yeah,
little bit.
we'll jump right into it. So the police department falls under the public safety aspect of our services, but obviously we're so much more than that. We're 24 hours, so we're the problem solvers out on the street, very accessible to the community, and that's basically what we do, is interact with the community and take care of issues and help them along. And like I said, we're 24 hours a day, so that means nights, weekends, and holidays. So that is the reason we have a pretty significant workforce. We have 140 employees over 4 divisions. Patrol division obviously being our largest uniform services that are available to everybody. We have our administration, our communication center, and then we have our investigations and professional standards division. Unique to our organization is that we have a communication center that actually provides services to the entire county. So police, fire, and EMS come to our communication center countywide, which also means we're also the point of contact for every department in the city and every department in the county during after hours. So whether it's health department, library, public works, whatever department is out there, they come to us, and then we try to take care of the issues or put them in connection with the people they need to after hours. Our overall department philosophy.
With that comm center, we're very proud to say that we were one of the very first in the country to have a combined 911 center.
Yeah.
We made a model out of that.
Very unique across the state, and it's a nice cost share program that helps, fund that division.
Yeah, so the county pays a percentage of that budget.
So our policing philosophy is very strong community-oriented policing, which means we strive to make those connections with the neighborhood and interact with the community, and it's where we made the initial shift from the totally reactive policing and calls for service to that proactive engagement with neighborhoods. And that's the big difference in our policing style in comparison to other departments. About the mid-90s, we started with the community-oriented policing philosophy, in that we had 1 or 2 officers and they worked at Water Street. But we really expanded that program to the entire department, and it impacts our hiring decisions, the structure of our department, and how we actually deliver services. So it really identifies who we are in comparison to other departments. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the proactive and reactive later, but strictly reactive standpoint, we handle 28,000 calls for service a year, meaning that when people call, they expect the police to come, and that's that known quantity that we can measure every year, but those are on the rise. Other than the calls for service, we handle major investigations and critical incidents through our investigations division. We recently brought on a civilian crime analyst, which helps us prioritize our crime prevention strategies, meaning we're very data-driven. So it's no more gut instincts or what do we think is going on. We can look at the numbers and say, we need to focus on this crime, or we need to focus on this type of the city, or this side of the city with our resources. So it's really streamlined what we do and gave intent and purpose to what we use our resources for. Just recently, when I became chief, I created the Professional Standards Bureau. And that's really to make sure that we're operating within the best practices within law enforcement. With the national conversations surrounding race relations, use of force and immigration, we need to make sure that our department is handling those appropriately and is able to give out the message to the community about what we're doing and build that public trust and confidence. So to look at citizen concern in the community or misconduct, we need a mechanism to look at ourselves internally and make sure we're doing things appropriately. So that was very important to add. And then the last bullet point on just the activities, we've seen dramatic increase in special events we talked about. Dignitary protection, that's something that other communities aren't seeing like Eau Claire. Eau Claire is a very popular place for political events and gatherings. I think people look at Eau Claire as a very attractive place to have a voice, to get together and to voice those concerns or support. So we've had a lot of rally and demonstrations as well. And you talk about public safety and public service, really a lot of our job is protecting individual rights, so that people have the right to have that voice, to provide those opportunities for the community to gather in a peaceful way and express themselves. And so those special events, dignitary protection, and rallies, those are things that just kind of popped up and became our responsibility to make sure we oversee those and make sure they're done safely. But those are things that we've just kind of had to absorb, but we know they're a very important part of our job. The two graphs that I put here are the crime rate on the left and the response time on the right. Those are two graphs that were identified in the comprehensive plan as being significant items of interest to the public, meaning that they want to know what the crime rate is and they want to control that, and they also want to know what the response time is. When they call, how long does it take for emergency services to respond? First, I'll address the crime rate. And we could go back to about 87 because we do track the crime rate on a regular basis, but you can see that there was a nice downward trend over the years until the last 5 years, and then we've seen a dramatic increase. And that really coincides with our calls for service and some of the national issues that are going on lately. The line that you see on the left in 1996, we were at this point many years ago where we had reduced budget dollars and reduced resources when the crime rate was really high. And at that point, we had 13 police officers at the police department at one time. So we haven't had much of an increase since that time, but you can see that adding 13 officers, changing our policing philosophy, the things that we can do when we become proactive and address those issues, we can reduce calls for service, we can reduce the crime rate, and live in those the quality of life that we come to expect in Eau Claire. Now, unfortunately, over the last 5 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in the calls for service, the crime rate, everything's on the increase. And the reason I bring that to you today is because we're starting to approach those crime rate numbers that we did back in the late 80s and early 90s. And that's where we were really peaking out with some of the issues that we're dealing with locally. And so we need to start thinking about how can we address those concerns, both as resources, budgeting, and just the way we approach policing. So we're at a critical juncture right now where we need to have those community conversations about what we need to change. On the right is the response time. So that is the minute we get the call to the minute a police officer shows up. We've seen an increase from about 19 minutes and 42 seconds up to 26 minutes now for response time. Not really significant in just the number of time, but we have to start looking at what's the community's threshold for police response. Now that averages out emergency response and non-emergency response, meaning if it's an emergency, the response time is within a few minutes. If it's not, it's actually over an hour. So, as we average it out, we sit about that 26-minute time. So, is that acceptable, and is that something that the community is willing to, accept as a response time for non-emergency calls? And that's where we look at our resources, what's available to us. Currently, on the service levels, we have 1.46 officers per 1,000 capita in the city of Eau Claire. The Wisconsin average is 1.73, and actually the federal average is 1.7. So the state and the federal level are at the same rate. In order to be the average, or have the average number of officers in the city, we'd have to add 18 officers to our force. So, that's pretty significant when you look at numbers, and I don't think we need to, change our force just because the average says we have to have 18 more officers, but it does give us some time to pause and look at the national averages and the state averages of what they have for resources and compare it to what we have. And then if you combine that with the increase in crime rate or the calls for service, that's where we start to say that, maybe we need to rethink the number of officers or the resources that we have. And that's just a data-driven number that we can refer to when we have a bigger discussion. The fact is, crime rate's increasing, calls for service are increasing, we're at 11-year high. Response times are increasing. We have longer investigation times, meaning when an officer arrives on scene, they spend an average of 1 hour and 32 seconds on a call. Back in the 90s, now they spend 1 hour and 11 minutes on a call. So, again, that's not much of an increase, but it is, I think it shows that we have more capabilities and we spend more time on investigations overall. And so again, is that something that's, acceptable to the public as far as how much time that we spend on those, which impacts our response time for other calls for service. Some of the things that we do right now to make up some of the deficiencies are we do not fill shift vacancies. So if an officer is on training or sick or vacation, we do not backfill those positions with overtime. We've determined a number of a minimum staffing level on every shift at every time to know what's safe for our officers and the community. And we'll go down to that level just to save money and continue with our safe operations. Right now, every officer has 92 hours of project time that's dedicated to proactive activity, meaning that they can work on neighborhood issues, they can go to other meetings, they can be on other cooperative meetings and community events. And we reserve that time to preserve that proactive activity and that problem solving. But we started to chisel away at those 92 hours, start filling in for the overtime, for those other short shifts. And so we've started to transition from that, the balance of proactive and reactive to more reactive. And that's where we start seeing challenges with the number of calls for service and the crime rate. So it's not a good trend to follow, but we have to manage that closely. We still want to stay connected with those neighborhoods, which is really the positive thing that we've done over the last 5 years, to really attend all those neighborhood meetings and have that face-to-face and understand what the different issues are in each of the neighborhoods. And the other point to make is that we've had 6 officer-involved shootings in 5 years, which is unprecedented for Eau Claire and really for any community in Wisconsin. Eau Claire is a safe community, however, there's many critical incidents, and tragedies that are occurring that we have to be capable of handling. 90% of our job is working with the community, problem solving, but we do have that percentage of calls that require expertise. They require the equipment and training for officers to be able to respond to those. And that they're a reality of a city that's starting to grow and deal with bigger issues. Now in the future, just some things that we have been looking at, if we don't have an increase in resources or we start going down the same path, how do we reallocate what we do? Again, transition from a more proactive policing to reactive policing, which is not desirable, but it may be a reality in our world if we don't have the resources. We may have to increase self-reports or teleservice, meaning that empower people to go online to file a police report. That maybe it's just an insurance claim or something that's more paperwork generated, or maybe resort to more cases where police officers just call to complain, to talk on the phone, or just to make it a quicker process. Both of them not desirable because we pride ourselves in service and face-to-face connection with the community, which starts to create that distance. May have to look at the types of calls that we actually respond to, reduce some of those service calls that we kind of take for granted now or we enjoy. The other,
Why don't you speak to some of the calls we no longer do, that we used to do, like, say, 10 years ago?
right, I guess car lock calls is a big one. You know, we used to, those are the type of service events that, you know, are kind of community caretaker type calls for service that were traditionally something that neighborhood officers did on the beat. And just those things that, they don't have to call the police department, they just know that those type of services can be taken care of. Working with businesses that have business models that incorporate the police department into their business model. A good example of that is false alarms. So alarm companies sell you know, alarm equipment, they sell monitoring equipment, but when there's a problem, they call the police department to go there and fix or respond to it. 99% of alarms are false, but yet you know, the companies have relied on taxpayer dollars to respond to those maintenance issues or just to make sure and fulfill that service. So those are the type of things that we look at as far as a business model, and what are our tax dollars and people being used for in the community that maybe can be diverted to.
Gas drive-offs.
Gas drive-offs were another one where we had a huge increase in people stealing gas from gas stations. We had an increase, and the reason we found out that they were able to do it so easily is there wasn't prepaid at the gas tank. So they would be in an area of the parking lot where they weren't monitored by video cameras and employees just weren't aware of it, so they would take the gas and drive off, then we would get called. And so we were responding to 10 to 15 gas thefts, you know, in a week's time. And we found that if we just talk to the business and change their practice of requiring prepay, it really dramatically reduced the gas thefts. So then that reduced, you know, 1,000 calls for service a year. So those are the type of proactive problem-solving activities that we can work, our officers, if they have that time, to work with business to reduce those calls for service that demand so much of our time and really aren't police services to begin with. Let's see here. So some of the things we would like to do in the future, which right now we're kind of waiting to determine what our resources are. Homelessness outreach team. We really need to start taking a problem solving approach to the individuals that are in the community, meaning we need to do that face-to-face identification of individuals, understand why they're homeless. Is it mental health issues? Is it substance abuse? Is it just they don't have a job? Is it chronic or is it temporary? And then get them to those service providers that can solve that problem. We have a lot of good community conversations going on right now behind the scenes that are looking at housing and what they can provide, but we need to identify those people and get them in the right place. And so we need to create you know, a team of officers that can actually go out and do that on a day-to-day basis and identify these people and get them in the right direction if we're going to make any progress. The body camera program, obviously we're in support of that. Our officers are in support of it, but it's very expensive to start a program like that. It's about $500,000 to start it with the equipment, and initiate the program. Then it's a yearly maintenance fee of $250,000 a year for the licensing, and the storage. And so where it seems like a common sense, approach to take in today's world, and we support it, it's just fiscally, not, available to us right now. So looking ahead, there's gonna be state legislation that may require this in the future and give us direction on what we need to do, so we need to start planning for that. And if that's a desire within the community, maybe prioritize that a little bit. The final one is the domestic abuse lethality assessment program. Right now, our violent crime is rising, and we see it in violence against women and domestic abuse. That's where we're seeing the greatest increases. This program would allow us to assess each victim of domestic abuse to determine their likelihood or risk factor of being victimized again, and provide those higher risk individuals with services to break that cycle and to get out of that situation. And that's something that's gonna add about 10 minutes to each investigation. So when you look at response times and lengths of investigations, that's what we have to gauge is, are these other measures acceptable to the community as far as the increases in crime rate and response time? I think it is, especially when we're talking about violence in the community, which we don't see a lot of. But right now, we're at the national average of violent crime, and so that would be an area where we would focus to try to make an impact on that rise.
Jerry, could you talk to the way we distribute our employees in, the districts and some of the requirements that you have of your officers in terms of the contact they have to make and projects they have to do? So, kind of how it's, community policing is not just being community oriented on a beat, but it truly is a way in which you structure the organization from top to bottom.
Right, and when I talked about community-oriented policing, it is more than just an officer out on the street shaking hands. It really is about the structure of our department and how we deliver services. So we have 3 districts within the city. Within each district we have different neighborhoods. And I think I've sat down with many of you to discuss that. But the significance of that is we have an officer assigned to a neighborhood for a year at a time. And so they get 92 project hours on top of their regular calls for service duty to make that connection with the neighborhoods, to find out what the issues are particular to each neighborhood. And so that's where, we see the advantage in the proactive activities is that every neighborhood in every section of the city has such different issues that they need to be aware of what those are and tailor their services to those needs. Catherine, you've dealt with Lieutenant Weber, and I think you understand how valuable those resources are when you know someone by name and you have their phone number, you can call them and say, this is what's going on and what can we do to work on this problem together. And I think that's the biggest thing that is an advantage for us, is that we recognize that we can't do it alone, that we need the help of the community to address the crime rates and the quality of life issues. I think the community also realize they can help and they can be a part of the solution as long as we have that dialogue.
Questions for Jerry?
So, these false alarms to the burglar alarms and all that kind of stuff, you're gonna still have to respond to those, I would imagine.
Well,
If someone's breaking into a business, you don't know if it's a false alarm, right?
Yeah, well, statistically speaking, over 99% of alarm calls are false, so we know that's a given. However, we do allow 3 alarm calls per business as a service from the police department. Now, once you get higher than 3 alarms, which they're false alarms, if it's a true alarm, there's no difference, but if it's a false alarm, then it indicates that there is a pattern of maintenance issues, not working with the alarm appropriately. There's other issues that the alarm company and the owner can work with to resolve.
Right.
And so what we've done, we used to respond to alarms at a business at 10 to 15 times a year. And so a pretty dramatic drain on our police resources. Well, once we get to 3, we know there's something else going on. And so we work with the owner and the company, the alarm company, to address that issue, to try to reduce the false alarms. And so after 3 calls, we go to what we call a verified response, meaning we don't respond until someone is on scene and says there's a problem. So a broken window or something. But there is there's a different tiers of response based on the history of the location.
Well, that was one of the things I've written down here. I thought, well, maybe after one or two, then there'd be a charge involved to to the place. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, then there's a fee if you're gonna call us and it's a false alarm. I know they do that in other cities.
And we do.
Okay.
We do have that in fee schedule, and so there's tiered, tiered responses, but the reality is that there's a limited effect on that, because some business, that's the price of doing business. If I have to pay for a false alarm and not worry about it, I'm willing to pay $300 per alarm to do that. And it
There you
does-
go, there's a revenue source for you. You can hire another officer if you do that.
We just got out of the
Let's be
business of false
positive.
alarms.
One more question. Are you getting a lot of businesses to share their security cameras with you, and is that helpful? Is that helping you guys solve crimes, maybe speed up the process, or?
We've learned that public space cameras are invaluable to what we do. Our supervisors and our communication center personnel regularly access the camera when we have crimes in progress, or when we get calls and they verify what's going on or not. They can zoom in, and so that is truly one of those pieces of technology which have increased our effectiveness and success in arresting individuals that are committing crimes and keeping the community safe. Not only do we use it for the criminal aspect, but just community caretaking. For example, the gentleman that was released from the jail and drowned, we were able to go back on the camera and follow his path and confirm certain details about that investigation. Those are the type of things that we can use those for, really to reduce the number of resources and time that we spend on investigation. In fact, one interesting one was there was a suspicious object found at Highland and Hastings, a metal object. Well, it was the time when we had a lot of bombs through the national media that were showing up in communities. So that creates, when you're talking about shutting down a highway, many resources, calling in a bomb squad. A quick check of the camera showed that it was just a crock pot that fell on the back of a truck and rolled into the median. You want to talk about saving a day's worth of work and tens of thousands of dollars worth of resources. That camera did that day.
So you say public space cameras, those are public cameras. Don't you also tie into private business cameras?
Those are individual agreements that we have, that we've developed. Now, we can do a better job of that and gain access to more, but that's a cooperative relationship and understanding. La Crosse is a good example of a public-private partnership where they not only provide access, but also help with, putting together video that may be needed for criminal investigations. I think right now, we're on that cusp of creating those relationships and understanding that it needs to be a priority.
Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, that is critically important for EMS, et cetera, for fire, is I believe we were online with the detectives that a person was fishing along the shoreline, Phoenix Park, went in the water. They were able to walk us right to the last spot that they saw them, and then the recovery was that much quicker. And that's hours and hours that would otherwise be in the water.
Jeremy?
Are there grants for the body cameras? Although I understand since it's $250,000 a year to essentially operate them, it's maybe not that helpful, but is there like some initial funding help for that kind of thing for grants?
Yeah, there have been some initial kickoff grants for some departments that have different requirements. But again, it's the long-term maintenance and storage fees that are really what we have to plan for and have some future funding in place and prioritize.
Anything else for Jerry?
So, this kind of comes back to the 28,000 calls for service yearly. I'm assuming that's an increasing number too? More people are calling every year?
Yes, we're
for
at 11-year
service?
high.
11-year high?
Yes.
So I had someone call, officers on me, it wasn't in this community, but it was another community. I was on the telephone in the parking lot of a gas station, and the attendant at the gas station thought I looked suspicious. And I think some of it might have been because I have darker skin, but they called me and an officer came and just said, we had a call because you look suspicious out here. And I kind of talked to them and said, no, I'm on my way to somewhere else, and I'm just finishing up a phone call. And you've seen on the news that a lot of people have been calling in things that are not necessarily imminent or need an officer to respond. And I'm wondering, at what point in the conversation, who decides whether officers are going to be needed or further time is warranted, or do you allow the call response, do you allow the forgive me for the position, the dispatcher to decide whether or not that's a critical or even needs a police response? Where does that decision get made?
Right. Well, it's a little bit.
Because I wish in my case they had just said, hey,
right,
we're not gonna send an officer because you don't need to.
Right, and, you know, I'm guessing the issue with that is there was bias in the complainant to the police department, and the police department, instead of filtering that or seeing it what it was, just sent an officer as a part of routine protocol. So that takes education with the dispatcher and that group to be able to sort through that. Right now, our dispatchers are trained to send officers if there's a community concern. Now, our supervisors, police supervisors, listen to the radio traffic, and at that time, they can make adjustments to the number, or if it's an appropriate call, or if it should be handled maybe over the phone, to get a little more detail. So, it's a hard question to answer, because it's not a steadfast rule, it's really, you know, the circumstances dictate the decision-making on that. I can tell you that, as a general practice, though, our patrol supervisors are trained to monitor that and make adjustments as to whether they send an officer or not. Did you say that was in our community or a different community?
It was in Minnesota.
Minnesota, okay. And different police departments have.
I don't think that would
different-
happen.
There would have been 28,001. That was somebody else's budget.
Anything else for Jerry?
At the same time, if you don't check those out, and it turns out to be bad, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
but now if you could tie into their security cameras at the gas station, no, I mean, if you were tied in, I mean, a lot of gas stations have cameras.
Absolutely.
And if you have access to the internet, I mean, that might be something too, so.
My question is, I don't know if this is maybe a little bit hypothetical, but, you know, we're looking at this really enormous long-term expense for body cameras, and then also this desired long-term expense for additional officers. If you were choosing between more officers or body cameras, or how would you think about that in terms of effectiveness for the community?
Well, I would choose more resources, more officers. The body camera aspect is meant to collect evidence and to help with the public trust in the police department. So, you know, right now we have a video system in our squad car. So we were one of the first agencies in the region to actually place video in our squad cars to record interaction with the public. And so we have a mechanism in place to act as a body camera. It's just very limited because it's not mobile, it's in the car, and we have a mic that goes into a house, but, you know, it's not the most current technology that's available in body cameras. So if I had a choice right now, I would add police officers with the intent of, when technology drops the price of body cameras, storage becomes cheaper, that we could add that.
Do you feel like just having more officers for community policing purposes would accomplish some of that trust building that body cameras might do, or are they separate kinds of things?
Well, no, I think it goes exactly to why we want to add police officers, because we don't want to lose that proactive community engagement we have right now, and that's where we build the trust, and that's where people understand our purpose, and we can work together to solve community issues. As the number of calls for service rise and we become more reactive, we have less interaction at the neighborhood level, and so that's taking a step backwards. And as we are more proactive, you'll see our calls for service go down, and so less need for reactive style policing, because we're able to solve problems that are creating those initial calls for service that we're seeing. And if you look at the graph on the left, you'll see that the crime rate dropped after we added 13 officers and adopted a community-oriented policing philosophy. So that combination works. But right now, again, we're starting to see the calls for service go up, and that shift from proactive to reactive policing, and less resources, and you know, unless we get a hold of that, we're going to be back at that late 80s and early 90s crime rate number. We're not there yet, we're very safe, but you can just see the trend heading that way, and so now's the time to make a difference on what we want to do.
Yes.
I think in your request, when you originally started the budget process, 8 new officers, is that correct?
Right.
What does that equal in dollar amount on that? I mean, approximately
Almost $800,000
$800,000.
per year. And it goes, obviously, it goes up a little bit every year with, based on step increases and things like that. But it was like 780 or something like that.
And what that accomplished was we were able to then add one police officer on the street every hour of the day, 24 hours a day. So that's why the number 8 is there. We recognize that we cannot add 18 police officers to the Eau Claire Police Department. But what 8 does is that's a quantifiable number and result. And raising minimum staffing level, and having an additional officer available every hour of the day, every day of the year.
Does that neutralize any overtime concerns or cost, or?
Sure. When we drop below that minimum staffing level, we have to backfill that with overtime, because it's a requirement for safety for the officers and the community. And so it would theoretically lower the amount of overtime that we spend on just backfilling personnel.
Just a follow-up on Terry's question, is there a way to, if it's less than 8 officers, let's just say 2, is there some place where that levels out? It's not 8, it's not 18, but it levels out where the demand for overtime is less?
Right.
It could pay for itself?
Right. Well, what we would do, if we didn't have 8 officers to make it even, we would look at our statistics, the time of day, calls for service, and our demand on police services, and place those officers where we see the highest demand. And generally speaking, there are certain hours that just require more officers, more 2-officer calls that are more dangerous, and so we would do it based on a priority per day.
Maybe a different way to, thank you for sharing that, maybe a different way I can ask that is, how much is currently budgeted for overtime?
The exact dollar amount?
Just for patrol, it's about, I think it's 270,000, but we go over budget.
What happens when you go over budget?
We have to transfer money from other spots in the department, and it's different every year, just depending on what happens that year and what the demands were in other areas, but generally speaking, we're always over on our overtime. It's just a matter of how do we shift those dollars to cover that expense.
So if you were to hire, let's just say $270,000 got you almost 3 officers, is that enough to start putting a dent in the overtime? Or that would pay for itself?
Well, overtime rate is 1.5 times an officer, so at some point, you're gonna see a savings because you're not spending 1.5 times for the same amount of personnel. There's cost of benefits, and so that's something that would have to be calculated out if you are looking for a specific threshold where it broke even.
I'd be very interested in learning that. I'll save my other questions for after
Just
hours.
picking up on what Jerry said, generally speaking, it's cheaper to pay overtime than it is to hire new officers, because when you hire an officer, you immediately take on all the fixed costs associated with health insurance is a $20,000 hit right there. So generally, it's less expensive to pay overtime. Now, that doesn't take into a whole lot of other factors. That's just looking straight at pay. But Kelly, would you happen to know how much of your overtime is driven by minimum call-ins for minimum staffing? Because I think that's really what we were trying to get at, was how much, could the reduction in overtime pay for the officers?
I do have that number, but it's at my desk, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but we did do a big analysis of that, and compared over years, because of a lot of, like last year, we doubled, I think we're somewhere around 800 hours or so. So really that amount depends on who's covering that, but we doubled that last year, because we had a lot of injuries, we had the officer-involved shootings that put people off the road.
Right.
So we had to cover all of those, so our hours doubled last year in that particular category.
Yeah, so even at 1,600 hours, that's still less than a FTE.
The reality is, we're at capacity right now just for resources. You know, we're not allowing vacation on homecoming weekend, 4th of July, and other special events that are city-sponsored. And that's just not a good practice to be in, so we have to be very careful of that. And, you know, that's a change in practice from other years where, you know, we would allow vacation and then pay overtime. Now we're not allowing vacation because it just doesn't make good business sense to get someone off and pay someone else time and a half to fill that spot. So we've really adjusted our practices and trying to be better stewards of tax dollars and the use of personnel. But now that we're not allowing vacations, I think we're at that point where, you know, we have to seriously look at what we're doing just for quality workforce.
Well, looking at whatever it costs to hire on a new person and conducting all the searches, if you have somebody who is understandably stressed out and needs to find another place of employment, that there's another concept, that recruitment, onboarding, all that stuff.
And I think, you know, that's really the more important, I agree, that's the more important issue is officer safety and officer health, and that burnout factor of, I can't even take a vacation now, you know, and because the department is short on personnel and they're not letting people take time off.
I think you mentioned before too, the quality and the quantity of the hiring pool too is diminished greatly. Is that right? I mean, as far as, you know, people wanting to work.
Right. 25 years ago, it was one process a year, and we had 500 to 600 applicants. Now we run 3 processes a year, and we're lucky to get 100 per process. It hasn't reduced the quality of people we're hiring, it's just more difficult to hire. And so, in the 5 years that I've been police chief, we've been in full staffing for 1 month. It's that difficult, because we want to hire the right people. All this aside, you know, we don't fill spots just to fill spots, we need the right person. Because the quality of an employee ripples decades within our organization, because these are career jobs. People don't typically leave, they're here for a career, so we want to hire the right person.
Any other questions for Jerry?
Yeah, so I just want to be really clear on this increase in offenses that's being shown from 2013 basically onward. You're saying, because, you know, I don't know a lot about what drives crime rates, but what you're telling us right now is that you feel that because our community is growing and because we don't have the officers, that that's really the best way to tackle this increase versus all the other different kinds of things that a community could potentially do to decrease crime rate. You know what I'm saying is there's financial issues, there's housing issues, there's job insecurity or lack of good paying jobs, or you know, and you were mentioning violence against women. There's so many other factors, and I want to be clear that you're saying, you know, if we're going to move forward and potentially do a referendum, that we would look at this number and say, yeah, we're going to add 8 officers, we potentially will see this number go down. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There are many influencing factors of why the crime rate is increasing. Do I think we have a better chance to address that crime rate and keep the community safer if we have more officers? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that comes with a lot of different crime prevention strategies and having the resources available to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is a part of it.
Absolutely. I know that it's unlikely to make progress unless we have the resources to do it. And so, you know, to say one is, is the one thing that is causing this, or if it's gonna fix it, is really hard to say. I'm just over, experience. We want a chance of tackling this, that's what we need to do.
And over this time period, we have not seen a big increase in the number of officers. How many did you say we've added over the last 5 years?
Well, in 1996, we added 13 officers at one time. That's what the line is on the left side. There's a vertical line. During that period of time, we have fluctuated between 198 and 100. So, and what we've done over this period of time is we've also civilianized some positions within the police department to make sure that we have officers on the road, meaning our property officer and our crime analyst, those type of positions, we put civilian people in those roles to right, Kelly? Yeah. We've shifted those people, those officers onto the street and available for crime prevention strategies, and then left to the professionals to handle those administrative type duties. So that was one of the things we've done as opposed to just adding more police officers during that period of time. But
So
we
we haven't seen an increase really since 2013, though?
Of officers?
Yeah.
No, in fact, we've lost some supervisory positions as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I would answer that question, Andrew, in that reducing the crime rate will involve many factors. The number of police officers has to be one of those factors, but it's also other factors that we would have to work on at the same time in terms of all the different things that Jerry talked about with design and neighborhoods and communication and reporting. There's a lot of other things that go into the crime rate. It's not only the officers, but they have to be part of the formula.
It's part of the safety aspect.
Yep.
And keeping officers safe when they do their job in the community and critical incidents. And that's where we're seeing the biggest dramatic increases for critical incidents, whether it's mental health issues, substance abuse. People deal with tragedy a lot different now. There's more weapons involved. There's just a different way of dealing with high-stress situations that create more dangerous situations.
That's helpful.
They're dealing with different drugs, too.
One more question.
Go ahead.
And I apologize if you've already said this, but was 1996 the year then that there was a referendum that allowed?
No, that was a year when we had some capacity. That was before the levy limits were in place, and that was a city council decision to raise the levy, or the tax levy to the community to add those 13 officers.
Okay.
But that's a discussion, that's a decision that now has to be made at the referendum level rather than, the council raising the levy.
Sure.
Yes. With regard to the, like say we had 8 new officers, is there an estimate on what it would cost for things like all the equipment and vehicles associated with that too, that is beyond the 100,000 a year per new officer?
There would be additional expenses.
Yeah.
I don't know that there'd be additional vehicle expenses, because we have enough set number that they, trade off on, but, vests and all their uniform, I don't have that.
The 100,000 includes some of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just the equipment that goes with it, but at some point, if you add enough, then you do have to start thinking about some of those other capacity issues. Any other questions for Jerry? Well, that brings us to a 2-hour time limit. We present 2 options to you. One is we could spend another 20 to 25 minutes or so going over the fire department budget. Or we do have another work session scheduled for Thursday. It was primarily designed for your discussion around amendments, but we could do the the fire department as the first 20 or 30 minutes of that meeting before you have your amendment discussion, or we can have the fire department discussion tonight. What is your pleasure?
What about tonight?
Yeah, I'm trying to go on staff's okay.
All right.
Okay, just go.
All right.
I promise I won't be 30 minutes.
All right.
Don't mess with
Fire department's always faster than the police department, right?
Oh! That's like that response time. Okay, now. If only you had a body cam.
Similar to the police department, we're 24/7, 365 days a year. And I will keep this brief. There's a lot of information, so, welcome to jump in and stop me and ask a question if something sparks your interest. You have the sheet in front of you, and it does have the operations, the fire first, but I'm actually gonna talk about EMS first, that second sheet. But keep in mind that I describe it as a spider web. It's all interconnected. Everything's connected to each other. Fire and EMS, fire helps out EMS, EMS helps out fire. So it's, as much as we try to separate them, it's difficult. But we do to the extent that EMS is growing exponentially. It's 7,500 calls a year. It's growing significantly since we've taken our regional EMS. In about a month's time, at the second council meeting in November, you're going to have those regional EMS agreements in front of you for your consideration. I'm happy to say that we have nearly all 13 on board, signed, all the hospitals on for another 4 years for a 10-year agreement. So, but you'll get that presentation then.
Even the new hospital.
Even the new hospital. So everything's coming together. We're moving the system forward, but we recognize that personnel, financially, it's hard to keep up. Our reimbursements from Medicare and Medicaid You know, we're 38 cents on a dollar, and that's about 65% of our revenue. Our calls in total, 86.7% of them are for EMS. It's probably gonna get higher. The fire side is about that, 12 to 13%. We worked over this for the past 6 months, trying to get all this together. We had some difficult questions that we had to answer with our partners. But one of them was, what's our EMS system cost us? Give or take about $4 to $4.5 million. So about another $7.5 to $8 million is for fire, for the other 1,200 calls.
Wow.
But it's more than just that 1,200 calls. It's about preparedness. It's not just the 1,200 calls we go on, but it's about being prepared for what type of those 1,200 calls. Hazmat, swift water rescue, dive rescue, high angle rescue, collapse, confined space. All that takes time. It takes resources, it takes training. And probably one of the biggest aspects that you'll see in this, in these two handouts, and you've had an opportunity to read on this. As we spend more and more time on EMS, we're taking away from our ability to train and be prepared for that next emergency, that next disaster. That's the biggest challenge that we face, is keeping up our training hours, having enough staff to continue to go on more and more EMS calls, but maintain our proficiencies in everything that we do. And we do quite a bit, almost as much as Jeff's department, but we do it all in one. It's our personnel are cross-trained to the nth degree. Everything from radiological, nuclear, biological, that's just one day's training. If the radiological event happened, we have that throughout our community. Construction sites, hospitals, those are just two of the primaries. We're trained for that. We're one of the 2 state teams in Wisconsin here, us and Milwaukee, that's trained in nuclear and radiological for hazardous materials. So with that, I know there's been a lot of questions on special events and how that affects us and everything that we're doing here. We staff it with overtime. We only receive back what we charge. In fact, when they ask us what's it gonna cost to provide, EMS or fire, we just give them an estimate. They actually get the bill after we've hired the exact people, and we charge them exactly what that cost is. I believe we're required to, for our billing practices. It is taxing on the resources. It's taxing on the crews, especially when you have, a couple of years ago, an air show on the 4th of July, having to hire in as many people as we do. Or this year it was the Father's Day. Having more people is one thing. We are similar with PD, and we just do that with overtime. Our overtime always runs over, and we have to find it in other lines. We normally run about 200,000. Some years we ran over our budget because of our overtime for just this general staffing from day to day. Anywhere between 100, 150 we can go over. Right now we have a younger department. They have less accrued benefits, they have less vacation time. As this department ages, those benefits will increase, and so will our overtime lines. So we're actually in a good couple of years right now, but that's going to progressively get higher as they have a larger benefits to receive from. So with that, looking at EMS, I did ask for 2 additional people this year. That's just for peak time staffing. That's to work with the combination station that we have at Station 6 to, at least during the day, keep the fire service and the EMS service staffed at that station. That station is not ready to accommodate 5 people. We have it slated in the CIP project for 2022 to do a remodel of that station, adding living space, so that we can turn it into a 5-person station. That's the goal.
Which station again?
Station 6, yep, on Gulf Road, across from Red Robin. In 2022, we hope that we can get personnel in to staff that. Sooner, that would be great. But in today's sense, 2 people, if we look at a referendum, for fire, it's not referendum for 2 people, it should be referendum for 6, if that happens. But today, we would do 2 people for staffing, but we understand that with the budget restraints, that's just not possible. And we accept that, and we're gonna keep on responding to the calls as they come in. That's just what we do. And we're gonna do our best. Our crews are working hard. They work long hours, all night. They work 24-hour shifts, 10, 12. We try to keep it so they're not getting 15 runs, but we can't control that. That's just the way the calls come in. With that, like I said, the more we do on EMS, the more it takes from fire. This isn't just singular to Eau Claire. This is in every city and every state throughout the nation. They're pulling away from the fire services to support the EMS. We're an aging population. It's no different than I think I've heard talk about our increasing costs in our retirement. That's the same as the increasing in the baby boomers. For another 10 to 15 years, we see this trend increasing. You know, maybe in 15 years' time, we might consider reducing fire or EMS personnel. That's in 15 years.
But then there are people who are young who are gonna be having us benefits for taking me off the clock.
Yes, it's, you know, and then there might be a reduction. It's not today. It could be 15 years, but we need to get to a level that supports the demand that we have today. You'll see it in this graph, but I have another sheet which I pulled the data from. In 2003, we had 96 personnel, along with 2 civilians, so a total of 98. In 2004, we reduced 3 firefighters and a training chief. And then again in 2013, we reduced a quarter position. So we were actually 4 1/4 positions lower than we were in 2003. And that's where we're at today. So for personnel, and since that time, we've taken on regional EMS, we've added approximately 3,000 calls. You know, we serve an additional 30,000, but it's not that we've had that difficult discussion. Is regional EMS the benefit for the community, is a benefit for the city of Eau Claire? And we all believe that it is. It's definitely a benefit for the Chippewa Valley. I think we do a great job. They love the service that we provide. And I think in time, you'll get this presentation later, but I think in time that we've developed a funding mechanism that's both fair to the people who have to pay for the regional EMS, but it's also fair to the citizens of Eau Claire and recouping the cost of doing that. We've been very fortunate to have the hospitals providing that, subsidizing that funding for the regional EMS for the past 10 years. I've been very grateful for that, and I think everybody should, at the end of this, give them one big thanks. They've been doing that over 10 years now. And they're gonna continue for another 4 through agreement. So, I'll take questions if we have them.
Okay. Emily?
Oh, hi, I just had some follow-up about Station 6, which is right in my house. And I know there have been some, concerns about staffing changes and response times. And could you just clarify for me what your thoughts are for staffing in that station going forward? And then if there were some sort of a referendum or ideal situation, what you think that staffing would look like?
So, prior to coming on council, we had, just last year, we had a discussion on moving that to a combination company. There was a ladder truck there, but since then, we moved that ladder truck up to Station 5 by the campus on Patton Street. Then we placed an engine there along with an ambulance. And what you have is the same 3-person crew. And depending on the nature of the call, they'll either take the ambulance or the engine. More times than not, it's the ambulance. They have about 3.5 to 4 calls a day, maybe 1 or 2 calls on the engine. They would normally, if there was not an ambulance there, they would have taken the engine to half, if not 3/4 of those calls anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing here is we're improving the service by improving the response time to that community for EMS, which is growing exponentially in that corner of town. That's, and, that side of the community is aging maybe a little faster than the rest. The calls were increasing, from one area to the next.
Thanks, I didn't know that.
Sorry about that. I don't know, it's moving.
Is that aging faster than the rest of the community?
It's the budget restriction.
Let me find a better way to say it. We have more retirement homes being built, we have more townhomes being built, things that favor those that are in that portion of their life, and they're gravitating toward where they're being built. We're limited in where we can grow within the city. We can either build to the southeast or build to the northwest. That's the 2 avenues of building. Right now, we still have quite a bit of capacity up in Station 9's area. But if we were to add even more requests and demand on that southeast corner, we'd have to give great consideration as to how much we can handle there without adding additional resources. Peak time staffing, so the current combination company, that's helping with the 3 people that we have there, having the ability to take the ambulance. Eventually, we're gonna have to move to maybe doing peak time staffing during the day, and if you see the graph on the EMS, that's where the majority of our calls occur for EMS. But at some point in time, we have to move towards staffing that full-time. And I'm just trying to do a pragmatic way of getting from A to B with the financial limitations that we have.
And staffing at full-time, what would that
I
look
mean,
like?
5 people.
Because you have 2 on the ambulance and 3 on the engine.
Correct.
Right.
But that's adding a total of 6 people.
Right,
Because
because
of the shift.
24-hour.
Right, exactly.
And there's already 3 people there, so adding the 2 would then allow those 3 to be on the engine. And on the
Right, okay.
David, so Jeremy's before.
So when regional EMS started, was that this blip in the, or more than a blip, but
It's
a
more
major
than a-
increase in incidents, so 2008?
Correct.
Okay.
That was the first year of regional EMS. City of Eau Claire is approximately 70,000 in population, the regional EMS is about 30,000. Together, it's 100,000 that we're serving. That was it's not just the regional that brought that increase, it is also the City of Eau Claire that's increasing the calls.
Comment and a question. The regional EMS, we looked at that, I know through FISPAC and with your contracts with the hospitals and stuff, that's more of a, it's not a, it doesn't cost you revenue, it might even be a little more revenue neutral or positive for the city on that, and it allows you to utilize the people that maybe were in the stations and weren't busy at the time. Is that, it certainly doesn't cost us money, I believe. Is that accurate?
Partial.
Okay.
To an extent at certain peak times, and certain slow times. But we found that the combination station has helped tremendously in dealing with those peaks and valleys by having that fourth ambulance staff full-time. Well, if I would say that it's a break even, I don't want to lose all the thunder from next month's presentation, but long story short is, even with the current structure that you'll have in front of you, the City of Eau Claire still provides a greater input than the surrounding regional communities. And that will be for some time, but we have a funding model that will bring it closer to even. On a per capita basis, an example would be, currently, they pay about, and it's, this portion that they pay is actually subsidized greatly through the hospitals, about $7.30 per capita. What we've determined currently, the City of Eau Claire residents pay $27 per capita. Wow. If we move to a more equalist proration, if that was 100,000, if everybody was paying equal amount, it would be $20 per capita. But we're not there yet. They have the same limitations in raising their taxes as we do. So what we've looked at in the hospitals through the last several years, and we've given a presentation that was meant for a month, but we're looking at bringing them up to a more appropriate rate. Eventually, we'll get them to $14 per capita. When that occurs, the City of Eau Claire, if we broke out the $4.5 million or 70,000, $4.5 million less our revenue, the revenue that we get from billing the patients, that leaves us still about $2 million unfunded. So when we talk about this per cap, $2 million is what we're talking about, unfunded expense for the EMS system. So if everybody paid the equal amount, about $100,000, the $2 million is $20 per cap. But we're not at that. If we get to the $14 per cap that we're looking at getting part of this 10-year agreement, then we'll have to be down at $23 per cap for the City of Eau Claire residents. We're getting there.
It ends up being a positive for the City of Eau Claire as well as the communities
Yes.
surrounding us, if I
If we,
remember correctly.
if we did not have the regional EMS system, we would lose between $600,000 and $800,000 of revenue.
Right. Right, very helpful. The next quick question, it seems like a simple change that a lot of citizens ask me about all the time, and I know we got letters on it as well. Why are we sending the ambulance and the fire truck when you're staffed and you're short-staffed? And it seems unnecessary. So that's one thing that seems that we should be addressing. It seems like something you could address.
We've heard this many years. I think we even talked about it at a year ago. We work on a system called the Possum system through our dispatch center. And they break calls out based off Alpha Bravo and Charlie Delta. Alpha and Bravo calls, we don't send an engine company. Charlie calls to a residential home, we send an engine company with the ambulance. If it's a Charlie call to a clinic or a hospital, we just send the ambulance, because we know we have extra staff there. But on the Delta calls, they always get the engine company. Those are the most severe calls. We need the extra hands, we need the resources, we need people to lift up patients. Patients aren't getting smaller in society. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 5, as much as 6 people to lift that person, to get them out of the house, to get them out of the bathroom, to get them down, the stairwell of a second or even a third floor. I recall vividly trying to get people down, and that takes a lot of people, and it's hard on our backs. So the more people we can get on that resource, the less stress it is on us. That's why we send it, and I don't see that changing. That's the national trend. We're doing other things. We're trying to buy other equipment that alleviates some of those other back injuries, cause that self-load into the back of the ambulance. But as far as getting people in the house, that's just brute force.
What about those, instead of driving both trucks out there, everybody hops in the same vehicle? I mean, does that save you anything? Nah, negligible?
Negligible in the sense that because that hospital or that ambulance may then go on to the hospital, and now that engine can be available the instant that they leave. With the combination company, actually, with the 3 people on the ambulance right now, oftentimes that's an engine company that we don't need to send as often, or they can get turned away sooner, because they've got a third person to help, they've got a third person to drive 2 people in the back.
Okay.
So, it's a good question, it comes up every year.
Thank you, every year.
Anything else, Andrew? How, kind of a two-part question, but off of Dave's. How often do you think that costs are being externalized by providers in our community or others? And you gave a great example of, well, you know, we need to go into a home where someone, you know, needed 5 people to get up the stairs or whatever it is, or they had a heart attack and needed, like, how often is that happening? I guess the second part of my question is, and are you seeing more of that, is someone approached me the other day and said, oh, well, I had to use the ambulance twice in the last year. The first time I didn't get a bill. The second time I got a bill, but it just seemed really expensive, and I just figured since I got away with not paying my first, or not being asked on my first bill, that I didn't need to get asked, that I wasn't gonna pay my second bill. And I was like, well, you know, like, we need the money, blah, blah, blah. And well, he said, but you know, they're gonna follow up, I'm sure, a few times, and then they'll just let it go. And it got me thinking of like, how, you know, what, are we recouping the costs, and do we need to look at that? Externalization versus recouping costs?
There's a couple of points to that. The first one is, like other departments have discussed, when we find an issue, whether it's the gas drive-off, you try to work with the vendor.
Yeah.
We had a lot of, you know, nursing home CVRFs that were calling for what we call lift assist.
Yeah.
They had someone who's fallen on a bed, and, you know, nursing homes were doing this, and they tell us, look, this is a large patient, or a large person. But we got to a point where we started working with them, saying, to a degree, that's not our responsibility, that's your business model. You need to start having the resources, you know, mechanical or personnel, to do that yourself. Occasionally, we still do it, but it's reduced significantly.
Okay.
We used to have false alarms, because what we're finding, and this is the alarms, all of a sudden, homes were getting this ADT monitoring or some other service. As soon as they burnt popcorn or bacon, we were getting called to all of these false alarms.
Yeah.
Because you're finding more and more alarm systems within the private homes. To the business, we charge it's either 3 or 5, after 3 or 5 false alarms a year to a business, we'll charge them X amount. There's a policy on that.
Okay.
To the billing, we work with finance closely. We have an outside agency that does our billing for us. They also help advise on the rates that we charge for the local average and the national average. There are times when people can't pay, and we recognize that. There's a process in which, if it's not paid by Medicare or Medicaid, they have an appeal process, we work with them. Our billing agency works with them to help guide them through that process. And at the end of the day, if they can't pay, they can come back to the city and go through our process, in which we can determine whether it's something we want to collect on or not. But there's a process.
So of both those things, you think we're moving in the right direction then?
I believe we're doing a good job on recognizing that when there's businesses that need to take corrective steps to curtail their power use, we'll work with them to do that. And when there's individual citizens who are residents who are in a position that they can't pay their bill, we work with them. We find a way to make it so that we don't, for example, we just had a 90-year-old whose wife passed away, and he came up, he went through the whole appeal process twice. I felt bad that he had to walk up the steps twice to get to us, to come talk to us. But eventually, it was 2 or 3 months of a Social Security check. And we went through our process and waived that component, or at least we say, pay us what Medicare would have paid, which is marginal or considerably less.
Yes, Terry?
Is it just the ambulance ride that they're billed for, or is there other services that you're billing them?
Just the ambulance service.
Just the ambulance
Yeah.
service.
Predominantly fire has some small charges for certain things, but really that's not what I share what we collect.
One subtle difference in that would be hazmat responses. We bill all of the services back under both level A and level B hazmat services. So if there's a hazmat spill and the hazmat team gets called out, then that gets billed.
Yep, correct, thank you. Just doesn't happen as often as EMS does.
Any other questions for the chief? Then I would like to just thank all of you for your time and interest in this. I know we spent a fair amount of time going through it. It was a bit of a different process this year. I hope that you found it to be informative and interesting. I hope that you would agree that we can and should be really proud of the level of services that we are able to maintain, given the resources that we have. We've got employees, that, as you're seeing, that are regularly going way above and beyond, to service our community. The underlying message with all of this, though, is that the resources are just not keeping up with the demand. And long term, it's not a situation that is sustainable. So I greatly appreciate your time and your interest in the presentations. I know it took a lot of your time, and certainly if you have other questions or information, or if there's ways that we can package the information that's more helpful to you, please let JRI know, so that if you have information needs, we can help you with that. So thank you. Thursday at noon is the lunch at the water treatment plant and a tour. And then Thursday evening at 5 o'clock is the work session that we would want to have, so that you could talk about your amendments and doing amendments.
That's in the health department conference room, so if you go back out to where the restrooms are and you head towards the river, it's a conference room that'll be on your right-hand side. And just to make sure everybody's aware of the Friday update from the manager, there was a revised budget schedule, so we'll have that meeting on Thursday to talk about potential amendments. And then November 13th will be the date that amendments requests are due to the city manager and myself. Then Monday, November 26th will be the public hearing, and Tuesday, the 27th, will be the adoption of the budget and the adoption of the tax levy. So we pushed everything back 2 weeks in order to accommodate that additional work session and council members being gone to National League of Cities and some other things that were happening next week. So
thank you very much.
Is the CIP adoption, the CIP allocation gonna occur then on that second?
yeah, it's part of the
budget adoption. Thank you, everybody. Nice evening. 5 o'clock.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689. Or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.